thank you so much, Micaela and the organizing team for the invitation. I'm gonna share my slides and start with the presentation. So this is a project, it's a paper already published. It was recently published in the AJ Apply. And it's a joint work with Nicolás from McGill University and Raimundo from Universidad de Chile. And the idea, we try to understand what are the implications of migration. Migration in a country like Chile is like, you can describe migration or the recent migration wave as the main socio-demographic change in the country. Okay, I'm going to show you some descriptive stats about that. But in the comparative literature, there's a bunch of evidence showing that migration can trigger hostility and backlash reactions among natives. This can have important consequences in the political spectrum and even fostering populist and extremist regimes. This is something that has been documented in the literature. So in this paper, we try to focus on the roots or the causes of this backlash reaction that you can think in advance in two main areas, cultural or socioeconomic factors. For instance, crime has been usually named the top one concern related to immigration in many countries. And however, in many of those same countries, researchers has usually showed non-significant effects, and just a few of the papers has found that immigration may cause an effect on crime. So here's the motivation problem that we would try to tackle in this paper. Just to give you an idea of the context of the country, this is a survey run by Espacio Público and Ipsos that shows that crime and insecurity has been the top main concern in the last 5-7 years, consistently over time. That's one. The second one, when they ask respondents about what is the main issue that they relate or main worry about immigration, the top one concern again is crime or new problems associated with crimes. So the idea here is like we try to provide an explanation for this. It could be like exploratory explanation. It's not exhaustive explanation, but I think it is an important candidate, this one. Immigration may trigger misperception on socioeconomic outcomes. That's the main hypothesis that I want to try to test here. And when we find what we found here is like, and this can be a summary of the paper, even though we didn't find any significant effect related to crime, we do find effect related to crime-related concerns, mistaken beliefs, and misperception about crime on the population. This can have a lot of implications, many concerns. This is I'm going to put just one simple here. It may affect the ability to adapt or integrate immigrants. For example, in another paper joined with Nicolás Grau and Damián Vergara, we show that there's a fair degree of discrimination in the judicial system when you look carefully at the pretrial detention decisions in court. Immigrants suffer a higher standards for being released in pretrial detention. And let me describe very briefly the paper here. So first, the Chilean context, we believe, is interesting because there's a sudden and massive increase in migration. And this is something very recent for a country that hasn't experienced migration in the last at least 100 years. So first, we found the migration spurred crime-related concerns and mistaken beliefs. Second, it triggered crime prevention behavioral change, some of them. And finally, we didn't find any change in crime significantly. So the overall summary of the paper is that immigration may have widened the crime perception gap. And this is important. If you look at many countries, there's a gap being reported between the numbers of the changes in crime and the changes in perception. They're not aligned all the time. And here we provide one possible explanation among many others, for example, but this is something that might have to do with immigration. And we're going to try to show you some suggested evidence of plausible channels. This is something, and the last point is the area that we must find new results. I think this is when we think about new or potential or future puzzles that we should research on, I think we should think about the channels that may explain this gap. Let me show you in terms of the migration wave that has been going on in Chile. This is data, the bars are data from National Census 2002, 12, and 17. And here we have the proportion of immigrants divided by the population. So here's Chile usually experienced. This is a country with around 1, and actually until 2012, less than 2% of the population was immigrant. This changed dramatically in just 1 decade. For example, in the National Census in 2017, it increased to 4.5. And nowadays estimates shows like in 2022 or 23 is around 7-8% of the population. It has increased a lot. Here we show this period, which is the period when we focus on and the period that we have data on. Okay, and here's the line shows you like the inflows, because this is the data that we're going to use at the municipality level. Okay, the number of people are arriving to the country. So there's a sudden growth in terms of quantity, but also changing composition of the immigrants group. In between, for example, 2000 and 2010, most immigrants were from Peru, but that changed dramatically from 2010 and on from Venezuela and Haiti. Okay, this is motivated by economic and humanitarian crises. It has almost nothing to do with the Chilean context. They simply arrived because of what was going on in their home countries. Okay, so now let me show you very briefly the data that we use. I'm not going to bore you about this, but I think it's important for the sake of the presentation. We're going to combine different sources. Okay, so first we're going to use individual level data from visa and permanent residence permits, and we use different measures to try to describe or estimate the number of immigrants at the municipality level for a given year. This data is important because you have also some demographics that are important. You have the age, nationality, and gender and level of education self-declared by the person who is arriving at the country. So with that, we can create influx and we can build stocks departed from the 2002 census. Okay, this is not perfect, but what we do to deal with this is we try to different measures or under different assumptions to try to estimate the number of people who are living in a municipality year in a given municipality year. Just to give you an idea, on average, this immigrants population is 30 years old on average. A bit more than half of them are male, and 80% of them have a secondary school complete. Okay. What about data? This is something that I'm sure that people would try to ask later on, but of course we don't have data on unauthorized immigrants. This might be a concern, but we believe that for the period that we're going to look at, this is not really a concern. I can give you some ideas why we believe this, but some estimates, for example, talk about like during these years, that's only 2,000 people that enter the country without authorization versus 350,000 people that actually were authorized. For the victimization data and behavioral reactions data, we're going to use ENUSC, which is a national level survey. This is the main instrument to analyze the evolution of crime over time in the country. It's been done by the government is supervising the process, okay, but maybe someone else is running the survey, but it's consistently applied for this period of time. Is in-person survey, and we have information on the individual level with demographic. Imagine like we have a survey of 80,000 people per year, and the survey has been run in the 100 most populous municipalities. It represents 90% of the population. In Chile, you have 350 municipalities, so we're going to focus on
We lost Patricio.
You have a question about perceptions, concerns, and belief about crime activity, and also reactions, whether you put like an alarm in your house or you hire a guard or whatever, okay? I'm gonna give you more details there. We combine, obviously, there's no homicide data in the victimization survey. So for that, we look at the police reports at the municipality year level for the same period of time. Just to give an idea, the homicide rate is pretty low in Chile, at least for this period, around 3.5 homicides per year. I believe it is the lowest level in Latin America. And this has been fairly constant since 2005 until 2017, probably. And we ran some analysis looking at the specific features of the data when we look at the nationality of the victims, and in some cases, the nationality of the alleged perpetrator, okay? We have, for this data, we have 70% of the cases. So now, and the second boring part of the presentation, the methods, but I need to explain this. And we're gonna combine two identification strategies in order to measure the effect of immigration on crime. So first, we're gonna use this sort of municipality level panel data, and we're going to use the information at the individual level. So think about like repeated cross-section data, and we run two ways fixed effects model. So we're going to run a model like this, and we have different outcomes. Imagine like victimization, whether the person was a victim or not, crime concern, and preventing behavior self-declared by the respondent, measured at the municipality and year level. Okay. So we have information here on the, so we're going to look at different outcomes, and we're going to compare them, and we're going to run the same exact model for these three types of outcomes. Okay, so the idea is like we have like we're going to test the same hypothesis with the same under the same benchmark. Let's call it. Okay. So the idea is we're going to try to estimate the effect of immigration at the municipality and year level, okay? And we're going to incorporate a lot of demographic controls and information fixed effects at the municipality and year level. And that's our first specification. The second one, we're going to run an IV. I'm going to explain you the intuition of the instrument in order to disentangle potential endogenous reaction here that may explain the results. And of course, for homicides, we're going to use information. We're going to collapse all the information at the municipality level, not the individual level, which is something that we can do with the victimization survey. Okay. So for the second identification strategy, we're going to try to look at or try to address the issue that maybe immigrants may endogenously choose the municipality of residence. And if security is a concern, in the way that you can think about, maybe they can selectively choose the municipality based on what are their preferences in terms of crime, let's say, being very general. So the idea here is to try to disentangle those selection issues and try to focus on that part of the migration change, which can arguably think about that being exogenous. So all those preferences that have been reported in the observational data, let's say. So we're going to use like something that is in the econometric literature is very common, which is the shift share instrument. Let me explain very briefly, but I'm not going to go into too much details here. But the idea is to kind of separate the migration component in two parts. One is the so-called the shift and the share. Okay, so we're going to look and we're going to estimate before 2008 how the migrants were distributed in the country, and also we're going to try to estimate how the number of immigrants changed for each country based on the number of migrants that were sent from the home country. Okay, so with that, this is an identity, so we can sort of decompose our independent variable in two parts. One that we're going to call the endogenous, and the other one we're going to call the exogenous part. We're going to try to focus on the exogenous part. And why is that? Because the idea of this instrument is being based on the idea that immigrants are more likely to reside in the places where other immigrants live from the same nationality. Okay, so imagine and that's because maybe they have relatives or friends that connect them or make them easier to find a job or other kind of networks that are useful for them. So the idea is to exploit that. We can actually measure how our instrument can predict the distribution of immigrants along the country, and we observe that is pretty predictable over time for this. So we're going to use that in order to show that the second identification strategy. Yeah? Okay, so in the first one, we didn't take into account the endogenous selection of them. In the second one, we're going to take that into account for this instrument. Okay, so now I'm going to show you results in these three outcomes. Let's look at the crime-related concerns. That's the main or the general outcome. But these crime-related concerns are built using different questions. Okay, these are kind of a question that are related to perception of crime or whether crime is affecting your quality of life. Okay, for example, do you feel unsafe? Okay, and we're going to summarize them in an index as well. The second group is the behavioral reactions, which is a combination of questions like whether you are investing in home security devices, for example, installing an alarm. Second group, whether you are coordinating with your neighbors on security purpose, or finally, for example, if you bought a personal weapon in the last year. Okay, and we're going to summarize this kind of question in an index. These are the so-called behavioral reaction. And finally, we're going to show you a lot of results in terms of victimization, whether the person wasn't or not a victim of crime the last year. Okay, we're going to look at 6 different crimes or types of crime. In addition, we're going to combine this with information on homicides, and we're going to show you different type of measures of homicides. First, the most common one, homicide rates, and we're going to test whether immigration is related to the change in the homicide rates of the municipality. But also, we're going to look at the intensive margin and whether the homicide rate increases or not, or the so-called, what we call here, extensive margin, whether the municipality experienced any crime or not. Okay, many municipalities for this period of time didn't experience any crime at all in a year. Okay, so let me give you an idea. I'm going to show you a set of tables that looks like the same. This is the first specification, the two-way fixed effects, and we're going to show you here the independent variable, which is the immigration rate. Okay, it's measured in log because you can interpret that in terms of percentage terms. Okay, and these are, each column represent different outcomes that we're going to look at. Okay, these are what we can call the crime-related concerns questions. Okay, it's composed by this 6 individual questions that we that we summarize here in an index. Okay, so the interesting takeaway here is when you look at it, we put the stars here in order to facilitate the reading. How you can read this table is immigration has increased the concerns related to crime for this period. If this model holds, of course, we can discuss about that. Okay, when we run the same model for the crime prevention behavioral reactions, okay, here we combine 3 different questions, each column, and here's the index that summarizes them. Again, a lot of stars here, meaning that the immigration is related to an increase in crime preventive behavioral reactions. Okay, and finally, what happens with the same model, but when we change only the outcome, and whether the outcome is where you were a victim of theft, larceny, motor vehicle theft, burglary, an assault, or robbery in the last year, which are the type of crime that are available in the database. And here you see no stars. This is positive, but it's not significant. Okay, and in statistical term. And we didn't find any significant result except for the case of burglary in this case. Okay, so for the first specification, the two-way fixed effects panel model, we did find an effect for crime-related concerns, for crime prevention reactions, and no effect on aggregate crime, okay? Now let me show you what happened with homicides and the different type of measuring homicides. Here, 4 different measures. We didn't find any significant change as well. Now let's move to the IV, okay? So in the case of the IV, we combine here, here's the effect here that you need to look at. And here we compare with the naive OLS that we can run with the same database, okay? And here we summarize concerns, reactions, and total crime. And again, very significant results in concern, very significant results in reactions, and non-significant effects for total crime or total victimization and homicides rate. And when you look at the IV disaggregated by type of crime, now the effect on burglary that was positive in and significant in the case of the two-way fixed effect is not longer significant in this case with this specification, and no significant results here. Again, the same story for homicides, where we did find no significant effects at all. I'm gonna skip the internal validity, and we run the recommendation by Goldman, Pinkham, and others when you run the type of shift share instrument. I'm gonna skip the endogenous reaction. You can look at that in the paper if you want. And let me give you an idea about the potential channels. And here we focus on 3 specific reactions. Okay, so the idea here is like we documented an increasing gap between perceptions and crime over this period. And this has been triggered by migration. So, but the question is why, or what is the specific channel that is making migration cause this kind of reaction in the population? So first we look at maybe the composition of the migration group can be something that could explain this gap. Of course, this is not for me, it's not an explanation, but this is something that we can describe, and maybe this is through this channel, maybe this story is happening, but still you can think about why this a specific group may trigger this reaction, may not others. We don't take a stand on that. We simply describe that there's some group that may be describing the increasing gap. It's consistent when you look at the educational level of the groups. And then if we run, I'm not sure I'm gonna have time for this, but we do discuss something about whether the role of media can play something here. We have another paper where we look at this very carefully. Again, all the evidence here is using the two-way fixed effects, and I think this is the most important. I think I'm running out of time, but I'm gonna try to speed on this and focus on this question, which is the more important one, I believe. So the idea here is like, one question, for example, do natives react different to ethnically distant immigrants? Or maybe the same question, but when you change the scale of reference or the point of reference, whether do natives react different to immigrants from non-European origins? The idea here is like, we use like an index of bilateral ethnic distance between 2 pairs of countries. And the issue here is that Chile score at the middle of this measure, of this index. So when you look at distantly ethnic group from Chile, you're gonna average those at the top and at the bottom. So that's why we focus more on the second one, which is one of the extreme of the index, and that can give you more information. For example, when we use Chile as a point of reference, we try to see whether this coefficient, which is telling you whether there's a difference between the composition of the immigrant group, is driving the effect. We observe no effects, not significant effect here. But when we change the point of reference from non-European or European origins, we observe that those more distant to European origins seems to be the main drivers of the results. And when I say the main drivers, are the ones who are driving the effects for perception and behavioral reaction. But again, there's no difference in terms of victimization or crime between those groups. when you try to run the same analysis for whether the more skill or not skill in terms of the level of education those groups may have, we observe that the immigrant groups were less skilled in terms of the educational level are the one that seems to be the ones that are driving our results. Again, the coefficients are different for crime-related concerns and preventive behavioral reactions, but no difference we observe in terms of homicide rate or victimization. Okay, so to conclude here, the idea again is like hostility against immigrants can have important consequence. So that's the motivation of our paper, and typically people believe that that can be related to socioeconomic or cultural factors. This paper is sort of in between, and what we want to try to motivate for another researchers is try to explore the channels here. So immigration is like a recent phenomena, and what has been going on in Chile is not very different from what other countries in Latin America, for example, are experiencing in terms of like the numbers of migration. For example, something that we are exploring in other papers, whether media can play a role here, and trying to be careful here. Well, that media may amplify some effect, but you need to think carefully about what part of that is supply driven or demand driven, like meaning like maybe people are motivated or demanding more type of news that are different from others. And finally, of course, this is the main policy thing, whether this misperception or belief can be corrected, because it can have consequences in terms of the political preference, in terms of the policy choices that the country can experience, and whether we can correct or not those misperceptions. So I'm going to conclude that, and I'm going to pass to Juan Francisco. I'm really looking forward for his comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Patricio, for your presentation. Before moving on, I would like to remind the audience that you can continue submitting your questions through the Q&A Zoom function. So if you have any question, please submit it. Now, Juan Francisco will comment on the policy implication of this work. Please, Juan Francisco, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Fernando, and thank you, Patricio, for this very interesting paper. Thank you for the invitation. I would like to my briefly presentation on the policy implications of this paper in three levels. First, looking at the data, but perhaps a slight comment on the data. Chile has gone through, as Patricio said, an increase, a massive and sudden increase in migration, but this change in migration changed also after 2017. So we have perhaps a challenge for Patricio, because I would say that I would like to see this same analysis made with the data from 2018 onwards, in which what we see is a change in three of the main variables in this work. First, you have an increase in migration, like twofold again. Patricio said something about this. We went through like an increase from 2% of the population being a migrant to 4%, and now we are near to 8% of the population being a migrant, and mainly and a change also of the composition of the migration. It's mainly Venezuelan, Colombian, and Haitian migration. And the second thing is that this migration changed due to the COVID-19 or coronavirus pandemic, because as many of the Latin American countries, Chile closed the borders on 2020, and that caused an increase in irregular migration. And as Patricio said correctly, during this period, the period of the data they used between 2008 or 2000 and 2017, irregular migration was irrelevant for the data. In this case, I would say now comes to a regular number of people that are coming through crossing borders, and we don't have many data on them. And the third data, concern, I would say, is that we have had an increase in homicides, and particularly homicides in which we don't have information on the author, so who is committing homicides. And that's a problem for the data also, because we cannot have a good conclusion if we don't have good data on this. Going into the implications of the paper, I would say this is really, really relevant. First, because we have to stick to the data, and what Patricio is showing is that you cannot conclude that migration has an impact in crime. So the concerns that the people have on crime are not driven by victimization. And that's this kind of decoupling that we have from perceptions and victimization in crime is really important, because it has political and policy implications. From the political side, it's not only having extremist politicians using migration as a political weapon, but also the problem is that politicians, we are vote seekers. So if people are perceiving that crime is affected by migration, you have the natural impulse to answer that question. Even if you know that they are not related, you have to have a good answer for your constituency. And that's a political problem first. You cannot answer that they are misled or they are wrong. You cannot tell the people, you're wrong. You're perceiving the wrong way. This crime is not related with migration, so you are completely wrong. You can say that this is true, but you're losing the election, and that's naturally not driven what politicians do. And on the policy side now, why do we have this decoupling? And I would like to have more knowledge on this. It's because I can hint, like, first, simple answers. So if you are talking to people and people are looking for simple answers, this is a really simple answer. So if people are trying to explain negative changes in their way of life because of crime, well, migration is a really simple answer that is on the table. Even if it's wrong, the answer is there. And the second, which is in the paper, and it's really interesting, is otherness. When Patricio explained quite quickly this racial distance from the Chilean people or non-European people and migration, this is because Chile is a quite homogeneous racial country. So a change in language or race could be a potential factor for otherness. So a common answer for the negative changes they are taking. And the third, I would say, implication is that changes in concerns and behaviors are real, and not only perceptions, but have consequences in reality. So, for example, people that are have low education backgrounds, or people that are more vulnerable, but feel they have to invest in security, invest in more protection, invest in guards, or even invest in a weapon, they feel that this crime perception is endangering their quality of life. So the answer or the implication is asking their politicians, their authorities, to stop the cause of this perception. And if the link is between migration and security is affecting my quality of life, then it's easy to find in the politician discourse ways to stop migration, because this is the origin, or this is the cause of the concerns of the people on security. So it's really a challenge, a political challenge, I would say, how to make the truth that we are seeing in Patricio's paper, the evidence that there's no evidence of a link, a direct link between migration and victimization, how to transmit that in a way that you transmit confidence and not a way in which you block the reception of your message because you are not, people is not hearing what they want to hear. They are not hearing an answer for their problems. And I would say that that's, for me, the main policy implication, because knowing that migration is having an impact in concerns and behavioral changes in people, particularly when on concerns of their security, is a driver for political discourse. Even if we don't want it, it is a driver. So concerns and changes in behavior will drive politics in the future. And if migration is a source of concern, well, we will have political discourse related to migration. And the second thing, and I would say it's related with this, is that this decoupling between perception and evidence, it also has to do with the overall crime figures. In Chile, we've seen a decline in the main indicators of crime during on the same period that Patricio analyzed. And so we have less victimization, but we have record numbers on the perception of crime. So Chileans are today more afraid of crime than ever before, even if victimization numbers are not as high as they were 10 years ago. So this is not a problem only related with migration. It's a problem related with crime and the use of fear for the political discourse. And again, the policy implication here is a dangerous one, because Patricio said, can we intervene, for example, media agenda setting? Because even if we can prove that media could be setting the agenda in a way that is causing more fear, the policy implication of intervening media is also a dangerous one. And a different topic is social networks and social media and the way in which algorithms enhance certain emotions like fear or rage, and in that way those emotions are those related with crime and migration or otherness. So perhaps there's a problem in the new medias we are using to fortify our opinions, especially in the topics like crime and migration. I don't know, Fernando, perhaps I would stop here because one of the topics that I'm just pointing is also confidence in institutions. We should be measuring the confidence in institutions, especially in the judicial system, in order to see if this is also a way of trying to make the people have confidence in this kind of data that is showing that their beliefs are not as clear in the evidence as they think.